So hello and welcome to week 9 in the Communicating in a Crisis series. I'm Jessica Shells from the Ideal Marketing Company, and this week we're going to be talking about understanding customer journeys. This is important now more than ever because customer journeys are changing. Originally we might have been able to use in store or in real person, and the options are changing to being more about online. And anyone who's got a good website presence or a good social media presence or email marketing in place will be quite grateful at this time that they do. Those that haven't are more seriously thinking about building theirs. So that's going to come into play because online is so much more important, and planning out those customer journeys are important. We're also going to be talking or touching on subjects that we've talked about in previous weeks, including personas. So all that information will be helpful. So you already know who I am. The structure and timings for today, we've got about an hour, but I actually expect that while this is a complicated subject, we should be able to move through it quite quickly. First of all, I'm going to talk about customer journeys and how they've changed over time, comparing in-store versus online and out of store, and showing you a couple of examples of what that can look like with some giants that we all know. I'll also introduce Google's zero moment of truth, which is a helpful model to use to think about quite a cyclical way that customer journeys can work now, and obviously how it will work from a digital perspective. Then we're going to talk about some more practical ways to map out your customer or map your customer onto your customer journey, considering their persona and where they're coming from, the kind of media that they do actually, what's the word? Watch or where they are, and then how to produce content to fill in gaps, to recognize any weak points that you might have where people might be slipping through just because they're not catered to. Then we'll move to a question and answer section, which won't be posted on YouTube, so you've got some freedom to really ask what you want. And the rest of the series, we haven't got many weeks left now, but we're going to be dealing in particular with writing content for your clients and customers, which is a really exciting and interesting one. I'm glad that it's further along in the series because we've really already laid some important groundwork. So understanding customer journeys, the fact is, if somebody sees an advert for your service or your product, they're not automatically going to go out and buy it. I've heard several variations on this, but around a customer or a client will on average see your product or be exposed to it in some sort of way 7 times before a sale. That can change over time, and actually I think with digital marketing it becomes that number will go up, because as there are more options and more touch points in the marketing, it's a more complex and varied journey. So instead of thinking in quite a linear way, well, okay, well, somebody sees an advert on the television, has a bit of a think about it, goes to the shop, buys it, takes it home and uses it. It's not like that anymore. They might see something on your social media feed, which might be a post from a friend. They then might click through and have a look at it, try and get away. Then digital marketing might follow them around or remarketing might follow them around the internet. They might sign up for an email for a discount code, and then they'll be receiving email marketing. Then they might see an advert somewhere else in a YouTube video, for example, and kind of be hounded for 2 months before they decide, yes, all right, fine, I am going to get the thing that I was avoiding. They might see it on Facebook originally and then move over to Instagram, and that's really the way that things work. So there's almost like a ping-ponging backwards and forwards, where if you're trying to think about a customer journey in a very linear way, that it's not going to work. So what we're going to think about instead is the state of mind that somebody is in when they're in different parts of the customer journey, rather than where they are physically or what website they're on. And then we'll map that to the content options that you have. So we talked about personas before, which is really understanding your target market, what they're thinking about, what their motivations are, what their pain points are, what their objections, what really matters to them. But an important thing to consider as well is where they are in that customer journey. Are they dreaming about your product, maybe thinking about something that they might do in the future, but not seriously making any kind of buying decision? Are they saying, oh, they're thinking, well, actually, I am going to go ahead and get this thing, and I really need to weigh up my options, have a look at this versus that, which brand is the best one to do, and comparing your products or services to your competition. Or have they made the decision and they're just trying to decide, right, where am I going to buy this from? For example, somebody may have decided, right, well, I am going to buy this Estee Lauder product, or I'm going to buy this perfume because I've already had a look at, compared it to all the other products. But am I going to buy it from Estee Lauder, or am I going to buy it from the high street pharmacist, or am I going to buy it from Amazon, or all these other options? So sometimes, even once you've decided the product that you're going to buy, there's a little bit of exploring to do around deciding where to purchase it from. And there's loads of different ways where you could lose somebody. Like you, as for example, the high street pharmacist might have exposed me to a product by giving me a sample, but they could lose me at the point where I go, well, actually, it's about half the price if I buy it from so and so. And it's only really me feeling for the high street store that would stop me from, or maybe convince me not to go and buy for a lot less from a really large shop. So that there's so many different dynamics that might come into the decision making at any of those points. And if you don't do it well, you could, even though you spent the money on promoting a product, you could lose somebody. So what thinking about customer journeys does is it adds a third dimension to consider. So before, we've talked about when you're producing a marketing plan to base it on the people who you're trying to sell to, what's going on in their head, then to also think about where they are and where you might be able to intercept them. But then this third dimension is, what is their current stage in your customer journey, and how can I cater to that so that the messaging is appropriate for who they are. This is an example of a customer journey for IKEA. And obviously there's some in-store stuff here, which is not happening quite so much at the moment, but you can see how complex it could be. The pink, if you can't see very well, the pink is about locating. Well, let's focus on blue first. Blue is dreaming. It is really not making any kind of buying decision, just very loosely thinking, oh, well, that might be nice, and there's no buying decision going on here. They're not being serious. Exploring is really about finding the best thing to, it is about narrowing down the search and really having a look in a more rational way. Dreaming is far more emotional, and it's really where you've got an opportunity for your brand to build, for people to develop trust. And also, when somebody comes to the exploring and locating stages, if you set the right groundwork during the dreaming stages, then the exploring and locating phases will be more likely to result in them buying from you, because they've already got quite a strong emotional connection with you, and it will overrule the more rational and logical elements that you involve with the exploring and locating processes. Your emotional side, the feeling, overrules logic more often than not. It takes a very strong logical argument to overrule somebody's feeling for something. So you can see the vast majority of this journey is about dreaming. It's brand building. It's just putting options in front of somebody, and then exploring and locating. They become quite efficient towards the end. And you can also see how complex the relationship is between these different types of marketing and customer experiences. The fact is that in-store is as much a part of the marketing journey as out of store and online. Just having a look, you might not be able to read very well because of the size of this, but online you're looking at the website. There are Facebook campaigns, there are a few different apps and smaller things like that, and the size of the grey bubbles represents how large a share of attention these different areas have. There's Kitchen Planner here, which is sort of like a tool that helps people to think about, right, well, what would these products look like in my kitchen? It uses an augmented reality setup. Catalogue is understandably a very large part of their out of store experience, but also delivery is included in there because that is a customer experience which can impact on whether somebody's going to come back or not. These are all touch points at the end of the day. Every exposure that you've got, whether it's the way that you pick up the phone or answer the door, whether someone's given a drink quickly when they come to see you, or if you're an online retailer, your delivery is all part of the customer experience and whether somebody decides to use you again. So that kind of demonstrates how complex a customer journey could be, and also opportunities to improve it. So this is the Google zero moment of truth, which keeps on being extended and developed. I will start with stimulus and awareness, even though this is a cycle, because normally this is where something has happened that might make somebody either seek out a product or start to dream about it, or they might be first exposed to it in some way. But one of the things that I'll use a journey that I'm a bit more used to, even though it's not relevant at the moment, which is maybe a lady might be invited to a wedding, to be a guest at a wedding. Don't know when weddings are going to start to happen again, but it can be a stimulus event for consumers. So as a result of that, there might be quite a few things that are going to go through their head. They want to look the best for the wedding. They know that there's several, this feels like such a sexist example to use, but it's lighthearted, don't take it seriously. So, you know, they want to look their best. It might be that they want to get the right clothing. They, you know, might be a while since they've seen the people who are going to be there. Might be a family wedding. There's going to be photos taken where they, you know, they know that it's almost, what's the word, when something is immortalized. Yeah, they know that that day is going to be immortalized. So they've got maybe 6 months or so. So at that point, they start to dream about, well, I've got plenty of time. Maybe I've got a year, because normally, yeah, it's about a year out. You've got time to think about it. It's not, you know, straight register onto some sort of boot camp for fitness or something like that. So we've got a bit of time to think about things. There's every possibility that as a result of the wedding that people will start, their social circle are going to start to talk about what they're wearing, or are you going to be there, or, you know, they'll start to be exposed to stuff on Facebook around, you know, being excited and what might happen. There might be a hen do in there as well, and loads of other planning. So there's going to be a time when there's some things going on in the background. Now, I'm going to, in this example, think of what product? There's loads of different products. I'm going to say a weight loss product. So it could be an online training one, because this is something where hopefully everybody's happy with their body and they know they're good enough, but it's just something that is going to be applicable to this situation. So they may at this point be exposed to messages. They might have been exposed to something like, how am I not going to remember his name at the moment? Joe Wicks, there we go. So they might have been exposed to ideas around Joe Wicks programs for a while, but with this new development might see it differently. So there's a zero moment of truth, that's what the ZMOOC, which is this initial exposure, and the exposure actually could have happened a while before they decide to buy. So they go through this zero moment of truth, this initial first encounter, but then when they're re-exposed to it with this new situation like a wedding, they move into the first moment of truth, where they're very seriously considering the purchase. And at this point, this is when they're in a more kind of an exploring situation where they think, well, okay, I could do this, or I could join the gym where I could go with my friend, but actually maybe I want for this to be private. I'm going to have a look at other programs and other options and really review the, you know, now that I'm thinking about this more seriously, yes, I've been exposed to Joe Wicks, but are there other things? I'm just going to do a little bit of research. And then they decide, well, actually, I'm going to go for Joe Wicks. They've got amazing recommendations. The before and after photos look brilliant. I'm behind the way that his personality comes across. Some people aren't, I know that, a bit like Marmite, but you know, it's, at least some people will love him that way. And then they'll make the decision to purchase. Now, the second moment of truth is actually the experience, and it's remembering that the experience of the product that you bought is as much a touch point as anything else. And the reason for that is because after someone's had that first experience, and every time after that, continue to have experiences, they will then move to the ultimate moment of truth, which is when they become a brand advocate. Now, this ultimate moment of truth, I think, is really the almost most important part of this whole cycle when it comes to digital marketing, because products are so reliant upon brand advocacy. And if you are going to invest initially, these first parts, the zero moment of truth, and any kind of stimulus or this initial advertising, that requires investment. That requires you spending money to get somebody's attention. It might be spending money on influencers or advertising on your website or whatever else. When you get to the ultimate moment of truth, the shared experience, you're not spending money on that. And what you're doing is you're getting a very, very powerful marketing message as well, because if I'm this person's friend and I'm exposed to some social media advertising or my friend having a great experience, I'm going to trust my friend who's had a brilliant experience. It develops trust, the whole know, like and trust that is required in order for somebody to get over the finish line and buy a product. That trust element is so much stronger if a friend of mine who I know, not somebody who's written a testimonial who I don't even completely feel confident exists, but that's great. So the ultimate moment of truth, encouraging that and doing what you can to make it happen is worth it, because then you get to create a self-perpetuating cycle where in the future this person's ultimate moment of truth becomes the next customer's zero moment of truth, and that's the reason why that becomes this cycle. Now, ultimate moment of truth, they decide to become a brand advocate for one reason or another. It can be completely spontaneous, which is quite unusual because, as we know from restaurant reviews, people are far more likely to make a review if they've had a negative experience than a positive one. So there's things you can do to incentivize it. But then ultimately that customer will continue to hopefully go around this cycle again and again and again. It might be that they get to the end of the product or the cycle or whatever it is and decide, you know what, I am going to move on. With Joe Wicks, I happen to know, because I have been a client of theirs, when they get to the end of the 90-day plan, you can sign up to almost like a maintenance, I think it might even be called maintenance, but it's a maintenance program, which means that you don't just go back to however you were before. So that's the way that this cycle works, and it's a very helpful way to kind of untangle the mess that we saw in the previous the previous slide. But what I will do is to kind of move on to a more messy slide, which is really talking about your content options, and it does map over the stages that I talked about before. Like the dreaming stage, the emotional stages, the discovery, the exploration, and then moving to purchase. So at the end of the day, this cycle isn't very helpful by itself, because you've still got to think, okay, well, what am I going to do in the zero moment of truth to encourage somebody? What can I do in the first moment of truth? How does that actually map onto a marketing plan? What can I do at the ultimate moment of truth to encourage shared experiences and also leverage that to its highest possible degree? At the end of the day, if you've got a load of testimonials, and the number of times when people have got a load of testimonials sat in a Word document on their computer, where this is marketing gold that really makes the difference between somebody. And at the end of the day, that's beneficial because it helps people to feel that they're making the right decision and helps them to access a product or a service that is exactly what they're looking for. So here are different examples. If we are right in the early stages, or the dreaming stages, we're really going to start off in the top left, where you've got the green, emotional and awareness. It's right at the beginning of that awareness stage. So if we're trying to make this a more either linear or cyclical, because you could bounce all over the place, but really that's where we're starting, when people don't really know what's going on. And what you'll see here is a lot of the content is not very salesy. It's very accessible. It's just about informing, but in a fun way that probably appeals to other things that's going on with them. So this is where you're going to get quizzes like you know, which body type are you, for example, or, you know, what wedding guest are you, or, you know, where you answer 20 questions in it, or what friend's character are you, or whatever it is, but hopefully something that's a bit more applicable to your thing. It could also be competitions where, for example, with restaurants, tag your friends, although I wouldn't actually recommend this as a social media strategy, but you've all seen it, tag your friends with that you would bring along to this meal, and you know, we'll do a prize draw at the end of the week, so you and 4 friends could get a free meal, for example. The virals, there could be so many different things. These can be hit or miss. You can spend time on a viral and it won't actually become viral, but again, they're quite frivolous. They're not too heavily sales related. And then we're moving more towards the rationale. If we move towards the left, this is where you're providing more and more information, and also the stuff that's towards the rational elements. It requires far more commitment on the part of the person who's reading the information. They are more invested. If you expect for somebody to read through an infographic or a press release or a guide or a report when they don't really know, like, and trust you at all, or they have no exposure, the only reason why they would do that is if they are looking for the information that you're providing, i.e. they've searched for something and they have a question that they want an answer to. So that's where you get the more rational content, and it helps to balance the emotional and the rational content out, because then somebody's got you know, that emotional feeling of your brand that helps them to trust you, and they also, at the end of the day, like I said, most buying decisions are emotional, but they get to kid themselves that they're going through a rational decision-making process as well, and they've got that to kind of support them, and you never really know whether one of those elements is going to help to pull them over the finish line. A press release actually can be a very emotional thing, because depending on the subject, it can actually help provide, again, information that helps you to trust someone's authority in a subject. And then we're moving towards the right. We're looking towards the things that really help to convince and inspire. These are the things that really do pull over the finish line. Convincing, these are the things that help to demonstrate authority and to demonstrate that you can trust somebody. So the ratings, the reviews, the webinars, that all demonstrates authority and expertise. When we're getting towards the convincer, they already know quite a bit about you. You're really just giving them the information that it comes towards the end of the sale. And reviews and celebrity endorsements, again, are more about just providing more evidence that you're the right person to be trusted with their business. So convince, this is really where we get through to the purchase, making the decision. So the decision, what you may decide to go with out of all of this is going to be, not everyone's going to have the budget or the time or the resources or the energy to do all of these things. And I'm not for a moment suggesting that you do, because it will depend on your energy levels, your resources and your money. So at this point, you might think, okay, well, now I know where things are. It might be that you're doing a few of these things, but you think, well, actually, the vast majority of things that I'm doing are educating people, and there's not really so much that I'm doing to introduce them to my brand and help them to trust us in the first place. Or, you know, actually, I think that I'm getting them to know us and they've got really loads of information, but I'm really low on reviews and the kind of things and case studies which would back up exactly why we're the right person to trust. So this can be a really helpful way to identify weaknesses that you might have. But what you can afford to do will be dependent upon whether any of these things are owned, paid or earned. I'm going to go back because owned will be things like your own website. It will be to some extent your social media channels. But if you are featured on somebody else's social, if somebody else is giving a review, that is earned. So that's where somebody has had that ultimate moment of truth. That's normally earned stuff. The review that you might get from somebody, that's more owned, so you have control over it. But if it's on Google, then it's earned. So there's these elements of control that you have. Now, if it's paid, at the end of the day, that requires obviously it requires a budget. I'm not saying that owned media doesn't, because if you have a website, then you do have to spend the money on it. But it's normally something that you do once and then you just have to spend energy on promoting it. Whereas paid, the minute you switch it off, it normally that channel disappears for you. And that's things like pay-per-click advertising, social media advertising. The paid stuff is more about getting infographics in front of somebody when you might be doing paid social instead of organic social media, for example. An awful lot of these things, you can spend time on an ebook and on branded videos, but unless you put some budget behind them, they might not never ever reach your audience. So as much as you may develop any of these things in order to promote them, then you may have to spend money to get them in front of people. Sometimes with being featured, having articles featured, you have to spend money behind, spend money as well. So the accessibility of any of these things really does depend on the budget, and I wouldn't take any of them lightly either. So now I'm going to show you how you might map a customer journey onto a persona. And this is, I talked about personas in probably the second in the series. It's well worth going and have a look at, because it's the subject that I talk about most frequently. Good quality marketing depends on understanding your target market properly, understanding what's happening in their head, what's most important to them, and that's what persona development or avatar development is really about, is understanding your target market, grouping them, prioritizing them, and ensuring that your marketing plan caters to their needs. So I'm going to start with Alison Ambition Adams. Sometimes it's helpful to have a name. It might even be the name of a client that you've got if it helps you to envisage who they are. We've got some information about their background, what they do, what their goals are, what their motivations are, and then also the stuff towards the right is about where to find them and what brands they're interested in. So you can see here that her goal, she's a company owner, but she's also a mother, so it's balancing out growing her business whilst also making sure that she's involved in her company. She's also wants to find time to look after herself, still take care of her personal appearance. And if we're thinking about this, she's going to a wedding, maybe she hasn't seen friends since before, or this particular group of friends since before having the baby. Maybe she hasn't got much time. So if she's going to think about a program like Joe Wicks, she needs to know that it's going to be efficient, because she hasn't got time away from her business or her child to spend that much time. If her business is quite successful, she might not be so money conscious. It's more about saving time, and she may not have that much time to be social recently. So those are the sort of things that might be happening. Because she's on the go all the time, she will use her smartphone more than anything else. So if you are considering any kind of targeted ads for her, the way that they show on mobile will be very, very important as well. She uses her computer frequently, but mostly for work. Unlike to use her tablet. TV she does in the evening, but only particular shows, and she doesn't read very much. So this is just an example person. So what I will do, you can see some variation with Hannah Has It All and Sarah Saunders, where the concern is slightly different, where their motivation is different. So what I've done here is to map the stimulus, the zero moment of truth, the first moment of truth, second moment of truth, and then the ultimate moment of truth. Just to remind you, zero moment of truth is first social exposure. First moment of truth is making the decision what to buy. Second moment of truth is actually using it. And ultimate moment of truth is becoming or not becoming an advocate for it. So the stimulus here is really the product that I think I've used with this is actually some hair dye. So she's noticed friends on or work on social media looking glamorous and during an evening out. On the same day, she happens to be exposed to a pay-per-click ad on Facebook targeting new mums. Now, that ad will have more impact because of what's going on for her. Then the zero moment of truth is she looks on the ad and looks on the demos and reviews. So really, this discussion about on the same day she spots an ad, that is really coming into the zero moment of truth. So we're kind of merging these together. And later in the week, when doing more research for work, she also notices an additional display ad this will be, and follows looking into it further. So I have a particular shop which I love and loathe equal measures called Silk Thread, and they follow me around the internet with things that I really would like to buy. And the number of times that I've clicked on an ad and then gone away, I mean, it's like 20 times per thing that I buy from them probably. So I'm not sure how well it works out for them, but I'm a bad example. So then later in the week, she's doing research for work, but she happens to see a display ad. Maybe it's 3 o'clock and she could do with a coffee. So I don't know about you, but that's always the time when I'm more likely to be a victim of any kind of display ads. And then she might do her own kind of research. So ask a former colleague who's a hairdresser about their opinion of this Claire, this imaginary brand, which is hair care. And this is really when you're moving into the exploring. It's not just a dreaming, they're exploring different options, getting a bit of background research. The first moment of truth, she decides to buy because she gets an email and she just decides, right, well, it's there's an offer here, so yeah, I'm probably going to get it anyway. I might as well get it at the moment. Maybe there's different sales at different times of the year, and I can't remember. There's like Black Friday and Blue Monday and all these different things. I think Blue Monday is a different thing. Anyway, Alison decides she might as well make the investment and orders online. But this is really where you could lose somebody, where where they decide, yes, I'm going to buy this product, but I'm just not going to buy it from the person who advertised it to me. So I think really you need to get some of the messages up front about why somebody should come to you, and why you can be trusted with their money rather than somebody who's probably cheaper. So think about this, because that's when you can lose somebody and somebody else can end up with the money for the product that you offer or service that you offer. So I sometimes see this with, well, it can happen a lot with service industries where somebody decides, yes, I am going to go ahead and get business coaching. I know you're right, I do need to move my accountant, but I'm just not going to go to the person who convinced me that I needed to do that. I'm going to start shopping around. And sometimes it's completely sensible, because just because you've decided that you're going to move doesn't mean the first person who came to you is the right person to go with. I'd always encourage people to get several quotes. It's just a rational thing to do, but be aware that that is going to happen, and don't pretend that the competition doesn't exist. So then the second moment of truth is when they're using the product and then experiencing it. Every time they go through the experience that every time they use this hair product, they're experiencing it again, and the experience is kind of extended to how she then looks, and every time she looks in the mirror, or also any comments. So the experience is not just the using of the product, it's the results of it as well. So what I have done, and you've seen alongside here, is try to symbolize exactly the channel that might be used. The first one is about the phone, and the second is about a tablet, because the fact is people are popping around all over the place. And if you look further down, you maybe got Hannah, who's more likely to be using her tablet than a computer, just because she's less likely to have a look at these things while at work, just the way that her work works, but also maybe far more likely to have offline experiences. So that all helps to really think about, okay, well, what media are we using? And then right at the very end, we've got the ultimate moment of truth, where her friend talks about her experience, and maybe she decides to provide a review, or maybe the company actually follows up with her and asks for some feedback. And sometimes this can be helpful if it's in exchange for something, although it can be viewed very negatively if you're trying to swap. It's almost like bribing. So that's kind of mapping the experience onto of the customer journey onto your personas, and thinking about where they are, what they're going through, and why it is that they should be using you. So this, I think, is quite a intensive kind of look at customer journeys. It really does depend on your project and the way that you work, but when you're thinking about your personas, think about the different stages that they go through as well. That's really how you practically walk away and try and use this information. It can feel like quite a complex subject. So that's it for this week until we move on to the Q&A. Next week we're dealing with writing for your audience, and then I think there's only maybe then there's going to be 2 more. One we're going to do on creating a marketing plan, which will be a short one as well, because we'll be using just some good strategies to go through, but they're going to be using previous more detailed webinars, like the persona development, which will be really, really crucial for being able to develop a marketing plan. So it's really how you map that. It's every Wednesday at 11 a.m. But please do let me know if there is somebody. I've got 1 slot and I can obviously decide what to put in there, but is there something that you want to learn about in that 1 free slot? Is there somebody who you think would be a great guest? I've only maybe done 3 of these by myself. Normally there's a person here, and that's great for getting twice as much expertise, marketing expertise in the webinar. If you want to know more about the future dates, sign up for future dates or join the newsletter, then go to idealmarketingcompany.co.uk and then /crisis-communications.